There we go. Okay. I think we're on. Okay. I'll just type something. Hello. Okay. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 8 here. Send me a message up there on your screen if you can see it here. You can hear me. If you can't, let me know. And we'll go ahead and get started. I figured this time around it'll be a little less structured. I don't really have a whole lot to cover. And we always talk about this being a conversation. It typically does end up, it's kind of a one-way conversation. But I get to read y'all's comments. And so I figured this time around we'll just kind of let it be extra rambly. I might talk a little bit about some stuff that's going on here at the shop, but I figured let's talk about what y'all been up to. If you've been on any good rides, I certainly have. Although we're getting some rain finally here in northern Indiana. We've been absolutely parched, super dry. My wife has, we have recently acquired about 3,000 new pets in the form of a hive of bees. Maybe more than 3,000, I don't know. And when there's no rain, there's no flowers, and it's so we're feeding them sugar water, and so we're all excited now that the rain has come. Maybe the flora will be back in bloom, and the bees will be busy again. All right, let's see who's on here today or this evening. Multifarious. I have not seen that name pop up. Hello and welcome. Welcome to the Ramblestream. Jim Winters. Hello. Seth Mark. Good to see you as always. And Jeepman Dan, of course, as always. Ahoy there. Good to see you all. This evening, I'm drinking a Modelo Especial. What are y'all sipping on? We got, will we meet your wife at the owner's rally, Ken Plums? I hope so. Actually, possibly. The family is planning a Boundary Waters trip, and the dates are not working out for me to go. Gary says, sorry, Richard, I'm going to have to miss this one. Grandkids in town. Awesome. Well, enjoy your time, Gary. Josiah Simpson. Hey, Josiah. He's in Key Lime. Oh, he's drinking. I thought you were in Key Lime. He's drinking LaCroix. How's it going, Josiah? Good to see you. For those of you who don't know, Josiah was one of our first employees here at Janus and has done everything from, oh my goodness, sales, marketing. What else have you done, Josiah? Deliveries. Like a ton of stuff. And Josiah still manages, correct me if I'm wrong, Josiah, you're doing a lot of work on posting email blasts and Facebook monitoring, I think. Yeah, post up what else it is you do, because I know it's a lot. Ken Plum says, rip it energy drink. Nice. Multifarious. My wife and I came up from Nebraska early this month, and we spoke about Tazio Nuvolari. I remember you. Absolutely. That was awesome. Your wife's name is Mara? Our eldest's name is Mara, spelt exactly the same way. That's really cool. That's awesome. That's a good name. Jim Winter says, Wrench Hazy IPA from Industrial Arts Brewing. Where is Industrial Arts, Jim? Always a fan of an IPA myself, although I've started drinking more of the lagers. New York State. Cool. Very cool. Okay. Well, as always, we'll start off with a poem, but this one is extra special for a number of reasons. First of all, it's about motorcycles, and you've already read it by this point, I'm sure, because I've got it up on the screen. But it's got a little bit of a backstory for me, especially. So this is by a poet named Richard Taylor, who, and I might be getting this wrong. If my father's watching, he can correct me. But he, I believe, knew Richard Taylor when he was living in, I want to say, Bowling Green, Kentucky. And this poem, which I'll read in a second, is by Richard Taylor, who I think about 10, 20 years ago, he's a really well-known Kentucky, very local Kentucky poet. He was the Poet Laureate of Kentucky a couple of years ago. I don't know how long ago. And this is what we call a broadside. This what you see on the screen here, where it's a really well-presented and printed section, a piece of text. And it's really they've become kind of an art piece or a statement of not just the poetry or the text, but of the printer's craft. And this one, as you can see, this is a broadside number 3 from Larkspur Press. So Larkspur Press is a really incredible hand printing press down in Kentucky, run by a guy named what is his name? Gray Zeitz. He's been printing for like 40 years. He has to get something printed by him, just to get on the waiting list, I think it's like 2 years. But it's all using handset type, which is like the movable, like Gutenberg used back in the day, and probably a combination of wood and lead type. But he printed this, and he prints a bunch of stuff. He's printed hundreds of books, all by hand in this beautiful printing press. And for a number of reasons, that was really appealing to my father when he picked that up, because printing has been a big part of my family history. My great-grandfather was I think starting at about 14, he apprenticed himself essentially to a guy named Joseph Bryan, who, my family's all from Richmond, Virginia, who owned the newspaper. And he did really well. I think he printed enough, and he bought a bicycle, and then he sold it to buy a printing press. He was really quite a entrepreneur back in the day when he was very young. And Joseph Bryan sent him to New York to learn the linotype process, which at the turn of the century would have been, or in the 1890s, I guess, when he was young, was the next kind of step from handset type. So everything was handset. And then they came along with something called linotype, which is I think they still claim, and this is really neat for motorcyclists too, lovers of machines. The linotype machine, I think it's been claimed, is the most complicated machine ever made, analog machine ever made. But it's this machine that has like a keyboard on the front. That's the interface. And behind it is like all these bells and whistles, pots of boiling lead, and you're basically hot setting type. So you type out the sentence, and then it casts it. It boils, it heats up the lead, casts. It creates a matrices of all the different, a little cast of all those letters, pours the lead into them, casts, and it will cast an entire line of type that then it shoots out the side. And you can imagine how this would have sped up the process for, instead of composing, which is when you hold a compositor's stick, which all the old printers used to do, and some of them still do. I still have a printing press. My wife is much more better at printing than I am. But you hand set all these pieces of lead type upside down and backwards. And then when you get a size of text that's too big for the composition stick, then you pull that out and put it in your galley, which then you stack up these galleys. And so that's when they talk about a galley proof in a book. They still use that word. It's because they would actually proof the whole galley without even putting it in a printing press, or they put it in a proof press, but they would take the whole section of type. Anyway, I'm getting way too much in depth into this whole printing thing, but printing, my great grandfather brought that back to Richmond from New York, learned it from the inventor Mergenthaler, and then went on to found his own newspaper and then ended up with the Richmond Press in Richmond. And then my grandfather bought a little press when he was a kid and did a lot of job printing, and I inherited it and learned how to print down in a place called Rugby, Tennessee, from an old printer down there, and have basically kept up doing it. I've got a nice little setup, and then when I married, my wife was fascinated by, she was a graphic designer and fascinated by it, and she has, what little printing equipment I had, she's quadrupled, has large presses of all kinds, wooden type, and does some incredible work. So anyway, long introduction to this poem. I told you I could ramble. I don't have an agenda, and I've already gotten through almost 20 minutes. This is a print my father gave me, and I don't really know where it is right now. We're looking for the print, but I found this. I thought, I want to read that motorcycle poem. So I found this online. But I do encourage you, check out Larkspur Press. They have some beautiful stuff for sale, and it's not crazy expensive either. So without further ado, Motorcycle by Richard Taylor. I have a friend named Robert, married and sells insurance, who rode a 650 BSA before his wife declared it a hazard. Now, twice a month, regular as premiums, he upends a bottle of Jack Daniel, dreams of donning his jeans and old boots and tooling that bike to Pauline's whorehouse in Bowling Green, Kentucky. When he rides, he changes his name to Jesse. I always liked that one. All right. Anyway, let's see what we got some in the way of comments. What is your favorite font? Yes. That's a really good question. Well, from the fonts that I have, I've always liked Bodoni. It's a really cool font that's got it's very, I don't know how you'd say it. It's kind of a traditional font, but it has this very geometric vertical lines. It's a really elegant one. And then one of the ones the first fonts that my father gave me is one called Parisienne, and it's the sister font to Broadway, which is like the New Yorker. I think, is the New Yorker Parisienne or Broadway? The New Yorker, the title New Yorker is Broadway, I believe, and Parisian is a little bit lesser known sister font to that. And I really have always liked that. But the one thing that I have a ton of, for some reason, my grandfather had, it's like a running joke. It's just every drawer you go through, if you're sorting type, you always find another money bag. There's little dingbats that are money bags. We just have hundreds of them. I wish they were real money bags, but they aren't. They're just little printed ones. So I don't know. That's a good question. Grant would be able to answer the favorite font. He's much more of the graphic designer than I am. I just enjoy looking at the lead type and printing with it. Seth Mark says, when I was manufacturing chassis, I hand stamped each car. There's a wonderful style to old stamps. I have 5 different typesets. Made it personal, like a signature. That's really true. We hand stamp every 450 chassis. And I lost my thumbnail last year stamping a mainframe. I didn't just hit it once. It was the second time that when I lost the thumbnail. But no, now we use a pair of pliers. But most of them you can just still hold the piece, and it's really fun. It's a skill to be able to get it to. You got to really hold it vertical, and you got to have the right drive. But we only have one stamp set, and it's sort of we could probably do better. I have a couple at home for stamping that are neat. Yes, it is an art to smacking a stamp. You know what? I'm going to make sure I'm following up on Facebook here real quick. Nobody's commenting. Facebook's stupid anyway. There are 3 people watching. Anyway, yeah. So anybody else on here? If you haven't, tell us what you're drinking. Craig Hamburger, how's it going? Good to see ya. Seth says, I had a custom one built for the company and never used it. It was more fun to whack them individually. Oh, you mean like a whole one for the whole? Yeah. That would be really neat to have a Janus metal stamp. We have one for leather. We can gold foil stamp, but haven't thought about a metal one. That would be really neat. It would be like a maker's mark. If any of you all are familiar with, I've dabbled in a lot of things. Printing is more than dabbling. I've really done that. But blacksmithing, if you're familiar with blacksmithing, which I have just dabbled in, I built a little forge and I have an anvil. That's about as far as I got. There's something called a maker's mark, and those are really cool. And I've always thought it'd be neat to come up with a neat mark that would kind of capture who you are. You know, like sometimes people use their initials and they'll like make a pattern out of them or something like that. But some of those blacksmith marks are really, really cool. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Ken Plum says, speaking of designs, a Janus hat with a 70s, 80s Las Vegas style sign that instead reads Janus is something I would buy. Huh. I'm going to take that down. I'm going to take down notes. 70s, 80s. I like that. Neon sign hat. A forge a mark for the battery cover. Yeah. Well, what I've always thought with the battery covers is I've always looked at those old Bruff Superior. I wonder if I can bring one up here. Bruff Superior marked their bags in gold, and it was just a Bruff logo. But I always thought that would be a neat addition to the. Let's see if I can find a picture real quick here for y'all. Oh, it's not going to be big enough. No, it's not big enough. On the fly. I'll keep looking. G-Man Dan says, number one, or one up, +1 on the hat. Yes. I think that's a good idea. I'm going to see if I can find a picture here of a Bruff bag. Images. This is like when people want to show you the photographs in their phone. Sorry. Go to large format. Of course, no, I can't find it. Oh, there we go. Here we go. I'm going to knock my beer over here. I mean, it's kind of maybe it's a little too clean in the sense that here, I'll zoom in for you. Bruff Superior SS100, but something like that. Even on their smaller bags, they made these lovely little bags that were more shaped like the ones that we the current Janus bags are heavily indebted to the original Bruff bags, which were angled to match the fender. Here, I'll show you one here. Oh, it's a lovely bike. Look at that. But see how that that bag honestly is like a little miniature. You can see exactly where we were thinking about with the first bags on, and that goes back to the 50cc. The Halcyon 50 had a little bag like that. Now, the Bruffs always had this interesting design where it was wrapped in metal, and then the bag would kind of accordion out of that, which I guess kept it from losing its shape. Of course, we have an internal stiffener in there that takes care of that. But anyway, we'll go back over to Facebook. Oh, we have a comment. Wow. We're going to reply. It's a one-man team here. Okay, now we'll get back to rambling. Seth, you say saddlebags would look the business tooled. I have this stupid little heart logo over the tooled something and branded. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think that would be a really good look. The gold really does take it to the next level. Absolutely. Well, let's see what else we can go over here real quick. Any good rides you all have gone on over the weekend? I hope we had some good riding. Although we finally, as I mentioned, got rain, so that kept me from doing as much riding as normal. But it hasn't kept some people from riding, and I wanted to mention we're coming in with an update for the 450. So if you're a 450 owner, this will apply to you. But we have noticed on the 450 that we have, and maybe if you're on the owners group, you may have noticed it too, that we've had some exhaust brackets fail. And what looks like it's happening is that they're vibrating at a high enough frequency in and out. So if we're looking at the back of the bike and the exhausts, come out, the exhausts are vibrating like this at a pretty high frequency, and it's causing either the exhaust bracket to fail, and I'm pretty sure it's a fatigue failure, or the actual passenger peg bracket that it's that supports the exhaust, it's breaking. And so we came out with a prototype fix, which we sent out to a couple of owners that had failures. Well, we've only had 3 at this point, but it's about the same mileage, about 8,000 miles. You start definitely having an issue. So we are rapidly prototyping a new fix. The first version was just something. It was a strap that connected the two exhausts together. But that I don't think we have any evidence that it doesn't improve the situation. But if you tap the exhaust, it still allows the exhausts. They're tied together. So I hope I'm explaining that right. But basically, the 2 exhausts come off the back of the bike. And, well, you know what? We can show you a picture. Because we've got OnShape. Go ahead and do that right now. I don't have my mouse hooked up to the computer right now, so it's going to be a little more difficult. But let's see. Here it is, right here. Actually, we'll look at the big motorcycle first. While that's loading, we'll look at some comments here. Might see if the Amish will make the front fork roll bags as well for purchase. Oh, you mean like one that goes underneath the headlight or something? I always worry about that because the front number plate comes up so high, but that could work. Craig Hamburger says, I would love a tool bag for the front forks with the branded Janus logo. Tell me where you'd like to see that bag. That'd be cool. I agree. Same. Charles, my guy again. Hey guys, I'm a little late. Good to see you, Charles, as always. How's the weather out on the Eastern Shore? I know you. I really loved. I don't know if you were on, Charles, but for our virtual live stream on Friday. Yeah, Friday. We showed a picture of your bike in front of the. It looked like a World War I memorial for the. Was that a tour of honor? What was the actual event? But that was really cool. I thought that was really neat. So we Showed a picture of you up there. Off and on wet, he says. Is incorporating some type of spring with the exhaust a possible option or solution? That's a really good question, and that was actually something that we looked at. Here we go. I'll show you a picture now. That was something we looked at. Me with that amiss is making this slow, but my fear. So there's two different ways of approaching vibration, and we've addressed this a number of times. Kind of the bane of my existence, and Charlie's for that matter. Let's move this camera up a little bit. Kind of the bane of my existence is chain guards. If you all haven't known, some of you all who've been around a while may know that we've had a lot of issues over the years with chain guards vibrating, cracking, and we've gone through on the 250, I think 4 or 5 different versions of the chain guard. And we've tried rubber mounting them, we've tried hard mounting them, and it's my kind of approach to it in certain situations, at least, and most of the ones where it's a fatigue failure of vibration, that hard mounting is a better option, because if you allow it to vibrate, it vibrates more and it just exacerbates the problem. I know that that's not the case in every single situation, but in this case with the exhaust, it's my theory, but and pretty well grounded. We have hard evidence to back it up that if we hard mount it, it won't break, because we actually use almost the exact same exhaust on the 250, and the 250. If you, I don't know how many of you all have a 250, but if you don't remember, it's the exhaust is mounted off of the lower hardtail transom rail, which is rigid. And to my knowledge, unless it was a very early bike, we've never had one of those fail. So that's kind of basically hard evidence that we were able to use as one point that if we were to make this a more rigid connection, it would make the vibration, the stress, the fatigue failure, it would reduce it. So that's the basic idea. But how do you do that? It's so far out there. And let's zoom in here a little bit. So here's the 450. Let's see if we can full screen us here. There we go. Get rid of that. Here's the 450. And if you look at I'll highlight it. This is the passenger peg bracket. This piece right, not that bit. This bit right here. And that part, it doesn't have any lateral, or it's not tied across the bike. It is in one place, which is up here above the oil box. There's this little bracket that holds the seat springs. That ties it together, and it's hard mounted. But down at the bottom, it can really vibrate a lot. And even if the whole assembly were rigid, this little connector bar, I hope you all can see what I'm pointing at down here, could still vibrate. And I think that it's just a different motor. It's a different engine. It has different frequency. It likes to be revved higher, like we keep telling folks, and it vibrates more than the 250 one. So it's going to need to be a more rigid connection. So initially, we decided we were going to try and just connect the two. And so what you're seeing here is the second gen fix. Here, I'm going to turn off that sketch. Where are you, little sketch? There we go. We were just going to connect one side to the other with a bar. So this little bar would go from this exhaust to the other. And I think that's a great it's a great idea, but it still didn't solve the problem of the fact that they could still resonate and still bounce back and forth. And so what we came up with was actually Woody and I sitting around the shop last Friday, or no, it was earlier in the week. I can't remember when it was. It was pretty recently. We decided that it doesn't need to support any load from the top. The passenger pegs, where they are now, it's not the exhausts are not bouncing up and down at all. The problem is that those passenger peg brackets and exhaust brackets have no lateral strength. So whatever support we need to put in there doesn't have to account for vertical movement. All it has to do is keep them rigid. So what we came up with was a design like this, which mounts to these existing brackets, which are on the bottom of the chassis, which originally were for, and could still be used for, I don't know if you can see those two, here and here are two brackets. Those were originally to support a center stand. Right now we're probably going to be, we're definitely designing and working on a center stand that goes off the back wheel. So like a very traditional center stand like you would have found on an old Harley or Indian would swing off the rear, where the rear axle is, the drop it, and folds up around the back of the fender. It's not only going to look cool, it's going to work really well, and I think it will provide a great way to access the rear wheel and lube your chain and all that kind of stuff. So we aren't using these two little brackets. They're in the perfect location, and I'm really excited. This is a really hot order for us right now to get this through, to make sure folks don't have further issues with their exhausts, and we don't have to send off a bunch of replacement exhausts, because we don't want to do that either. Real quick, look at some comments. Craig says, this is, I believe, in regard to the roll bag hanging below the headlight in some way. Well, let's take a look at that, Craig. The only problem is that if you put a bag under the headlight, and I know some people have done this, if you do that, let's see if I can make the forks move. Oh, they don't go that high. They stop before they do that. But that number plate gets real close to the, when the front fender, when the wheel moves, it gets real close to the headlight. So it would have to be pretty small. But it's possible. That's one of the reasons that I haven't pursued that as actively as other projects. Maybe if you put it right down here underneath where the headlight is, and it snugged up in there, but there are some wires. Be interesting to see how that could be done. Seth, NVH must be a nightmare in design on these. NVH. What is NVH? Forgive my ignorance, Seth. Ken says, so it needs to vibrate in concert with the whole bike or just the engine? Yeah, I mean, you could say the whole bike, because the whole bike would then be damping the vibration. I'm trying to think of a really good example of this on the 250 where we use that principle. Oh, engines. There's two different philosophies of how you damp an engine. One is, like Harley, they'll rubber mount, or a Norton. The Nortons had that famous rubber mounting system, which I forget the name of it right now, but where the engine can vibrate in the frame and it lessens the vibration. My take on that, at least in our applications, has been when we've tried it, which we did in the 250, is that it just made it vibrate worse because the engine starts hopping around in the frame, and then the frame moves, and it just kind of exacerbates the whole problem. Whereas our kind of take on it is that if you hard mount everything, and you have an engine that doesn't vibrate excessively, like maybe some Harley motors, then the whole unit damps the vibrations. The same could be said for our argument with the rear pillion seat, which is that if I'm going to mess up Charlie's model, the drive chain. We need to work on this model. We need to update it. If you were to just stick a passenger seat or a rear rack on this swing arm on the back of the 450, because it moves on its own, it's going to jostle whatever's in that to bits. Whereas because on the 250 it's rigidly connected to the rest of the whole bike, that it's still going to bounce it around. Don't get me wrong. The block pillion seat that we offer with the non-sprung version, it's not a comfortable ride for more than I always say, take the grandkids or your significant other down for an ice cream, but don't take them on a long ride. Whereas the sprung pillion is more comfortable. The same thing is on the 450. It's going to just jostle things to bits since it's not rigidly connected to the rest of the bike, which is why we wanted to rigidly connect the pillion to the main frame where it's suspended. Bunch of different examples there. Definitely rambling. Tell me if I'm not making sense or if you have any questions. I would say, to answer your question though, Ken, it needs to vibrate in concert with the whole bike would be that's kind of in general the way that I've approached this. Could be wrong, but it's worked relatively well for us. I would say that the counter argument to that would be handlebar vibrations. And we actually just published a blog post today from our dear friend Tom Neal out in North Carolina. And he wrote a neat little piece on, which I definitely resonated with me. Catch the pun? About it's loosen your grip is what the name of it is. But basically, don't white knuckle the bars, because that's one factor that will actually make it worse. And I remember when I was riding cross country, the first day my hands were terrible. They had that chainsaw hand. After you've used a weed eater or a chainsaw for an hour or two, you just feel like your hands are vibrating. That was all night long. I could barely get any sleep, except I was exhausted. But then I noticed that as I got more comfortable and I loosened my grip, it wasn't as big of an issue. That's one way of approaching it. The other solutions are a really good pair of gloves that fits, like Tom mentions, and handlebar weights. And I can't say enough good things about, and we can't claim credit. It was you owners that found them. HVMP is a handlebar weight, bar end weight maker, and he's just a guy that's I forget what is Steve, I think is his name. I'm gonna forget. Anyway, he is just one guy and a machinist, and they make all these bar weights for everybody. You can get them in stainless steel, raw finish, or a black coating, powder coated, I believe. We tried working with him to offer Janus branded ones, but he's just not set up. He's a small, really, really small manufacturer, and he's just not set up to have enough of a margin where we could offer it at an affordable price. It's better for you to just go buy them directly from him. He makes what's called the universal 7/8 inch, and I think it's a couple of ounces shy of a pound on each handlebar. And when the bike is idling, it vibrates, but as soon as you get up to where it really bugs you, gone. I have them on my bike, and they're great. Seth, slip fit the exhaust midship and use a spring to hold the ends together. Then it can wiggle. Yes. So I did consider that, and that is a common aftermarket exhaust solution. However, as the folks at S&S will tell you, there has never been a slip fit exhaust that doesn't leak. And it's okay for performance. The amount of leak doesn't matter. But when you're in a lab measuring exhaust emissions, it matters. And we actually tried using a slip fit on our initial 450 runs, and they caught all the exhaust leaking. And we tried a variety of different slip fit techniques of how to make the slip fit work, and unfortunately it doesn't work. So we cannot do a slip fit. We have to have a solid welded connection all the way through. At least that was the way we approached it, our understanding. And once you have gone through testing, you can't change your exhaust. So we cannot. That's one of those. It's a what do they call it in design? It's a design condition that we have to live with. No changing the exhaust, but we got to fix this problem. But that is a really good solution, though. I had thought about that. And I've even seen them with springs that hold on the exhaust. It's a spring that wraps around it. And I did think about a rubber mount strap around the exhaust, which would be another solution. But since we haven't ever needed it on the 250, we're going to try and base our decision off of what has worked on 1,000 bikes with, I think Jeff Bloomer's up getting close to 30,000 miles. So it's worked well in the past. Eric Fritz, how's it going? Yeah, center stand off rear wheel would be very cool. I agree. Actually, our 50cc Halcyons, the first bike we ever made, they all came with a center stand off the back wheel. The first bikes did not have a side stand, which was pretty inconvenient. I forget at what number. Maybe it took forever to get to number 15 or 12, but the first 10 or so did not have a side stand, and then we added the side stand. I can't remember what the number was. Actually, no, it was more than that, because what we ended up doing was the foot pegs we made. It was pretty clever. Instead of having it welded onto the frame, we made it bolt on with the foot pegs so that you could still have it even if you had an old bike. So, yeah. Anyway. Yes, that would be awesome for the rear tire stand. I agree. We got some other tricks up our sleeve too when it comes to rear wheel removal on the 450. I hope, I can't speak too soon on it, but I really, it would be wonderful to have that, to be able to easily get the rear wheel off with just a center stand. And because we have these beautiful swooping fenders, it makes it pretty hard to do. As I've learned on the side of the road, changing tires. I used my panniers. I have a big old aluminum panniers, and I stuck the bike up on the pannier and used that. Andy says that rear axle lift would be awesome and would definitely look cool. Heck yeah. Dan and I are planning. Oh, this is Andy. This is Felix. It's one of the Felix bros. Dan and I are planning a trip up through Michigan, over the bridge, through the UP, then around Lake Huron. Oh, that would be cool. I've done around Lake Michigan the other way. I went through Chicago. We tried to hit all the big roads at night. We left at about 3 a.m, and then the nice scenic route during the day. And it was dawn, and I think we got through Milwaukee, and then beautiful day. And then unfortunately, when we got over into Michigan, we were going up the peninsula, Leland. It got dark, and there were too many deer, so we curtailed that section of the trip. But I always wanted to do Superior, but Lake Huron would be amazing. I've heard just wonderful stories. That's one of the places I want to sail, is up on Georgia Bay and the North Channel. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Around Buffalo, New York, and then a day at Cedar Point, yes, and then back to Grand Rapids. That would be a great trip. Man, I wish I could do that with y'all. Jim Winters, I would love to have that rear axle stand. When do you expect it to be available? I cannot answer that question. One thing that I will say is a lot of folks ask us, what's your next project? Are you coming out with a 650? And, the answer is no. The answer, the real answer to that question is that we're putting all of our efforts, the last 2 years, honestly, have been in production engineering. We've been trying to make sure that the 450 and the 250 are the best. Really, the 450, though, since it's new, are the best that they can be, and that we can produce them effectively and in a cost-effective manner. It's very expensive to make the 450, and now we're kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel with tooling upgrades and getting better at doing those quickly. And so we're really focusing on options and upgrades, and really it's going to be the 450 that sees those, the most of them, because it doesn't have as many as the 250, and it deserves a ton. So I will say, I can't say when, but it's going to be faster than it has been in the past when we say we're coming out with an upgrade. I have a lot of upgrades already designed, and we actually have prototypes ready of some of these things. It's just a matter of getting them into production. It takes a while, and the last thing we want to do is promise something that we can't, that we're late on. So it's in the works, but that's a great question, and it's going to be awesome. Seth Mark an NVH, noise, vibration, and harmonic. Awesome. Yes, it is literally the vibration is the bane of my existence. I will say that, at least as far as Janus motorcycles is concerned. Chain guards, I'm trying to think, exhausts, fenders. What other parts have failed on us? Mainly it's chain guards that are a pain in the neck. And really what it comes down to is it's any big piece of sheet metal that can start vibrating is what stinks. So also, I guess you could count that 50cc frame failure. So if any of y'all were on last week, that was a fatigue failure, which is basically it's just something moving back and forth thousands and thousands and thousands of times until it breaks. Andy says, we don't have a date set yet, but any other Janus owners are welcome to join. That would be really fun, especially if you could take your time doing it. And a lot of the long distance riding I've done is really fast paced. I mean, I'm not going more than about 63 miles an hour, but I'm not stopping, which there's benefits to it. And there's also the beauty of rambling is that you get to take your time. Seth Mark, leaking exhaust, Sigh, California. Actually, it's EPA. California, at least for our bikes, for the size, for limited production, accepts EPA exhaust emissions. They don't have an independent exhaust requirement. All they control is evaporative emissions, which would be like your charcoal canister. It captures all the vapor coming off of your fuel tank, your carburetor if you have one, and your crankcase. But the exhaust emissions are EPA regulated. So that's anything, and don't think it's not true of anywhere else too, because most places use US EPA requirements if they don't have their own, which are in many cases like Europe more strenuous. Our old engineer Ken Miller, who one of these days I'll have on our podcast, Ken got us. He helped me get through the 250 through EPA, and he's helped us engineer. When we have a problem, we call in Ken, and he always makes an argument for some level of control of these things, because he argues that it's led to a lot of improvements, and I buy it to a certain extent. But California, man, they just make your life miserable. I mean, believe me, we just went through the lengthy process of recertifying the 250 line for California, and the carburetor passed 5 years ago, but same carburetor didn't pass the second time the tamper proofing test. So not only can it not leak, but it has to not be able to be tampered to be opened up. And the test they have is that they're given like I forget how long it is, 4 hours with regular off-the-shelf available tools to be able to open it up. And apparently he was able to open ours up within like half an hour. So we had to re-engineer it. We did it on a Ramblestream. I've already talked about that. So California, you're right on that. Left field, weight the exhaust with a baseball bat style weight. Change the harmonic. That is actually a really good idea. You could do that. You absolutely could. My fear is that because they're able to move that much, we're going to have more problems down the road. And so, the beauty of this design, which if I say so myself, which I really have to give Woody, who many of you all know from either delivery or service trips, I have to give him quite a bit of credit for this design, because it was a really fun. We spent about 2 hours just like poring over this and really had fun. It was a fun process to come up with this solution, and we were both laughing at the end of it. But where was I going with that? The fact that it's vibrating. Oh, it's a really cost-effective solution. I mean, from a manufacturing standpoint, like if we have to send out one of these, this is probably powder coated. we'll be able to sell this for, well, we'll give it to people if they have an issue. We're going to have to make sure their exhaust don't break. But adding it to the bill of material for the bike is not going to be a huge hit. And that's awesome. Because, I mean, if you think about it, this part is, it's one piece of 1/8" steel with 4 brakes in it. Laser cut. You laser cut it, send it to the powder coater. So I think it's a pretty good solution. And it's one that I think the bike will be better for it. The exhaust, it'll positively locate those exhausts. Sometimes we have to make minor adjustments to make sure that they clear the swing arm. This will positively locate everything. I think Ryan, the assembly team, will really like it. You know who I'm forgetting are the people on Facebook. They don't count anyway. I'll go over there and see if they have any questions or what they're doing. Let's see who else is over here. Oh, we have one more comment. I just wish that you sourced your engine from a USA company. Well, that would be much more convenient. Believe me, we do too. We wouldn't have to ship them halfway around the world. Let's see. We got some more comments here. Any type of contraption in the works to lift the front wheel as well? You know, that's a good question. I mean, you could come up with something like that. The front wheel was never as big of a deal for me. I mean, I don't know why. It's a good question. I mean, the old bikes, they used to have a swing arm, or not a swing arm, a center stand like we're talking about on the front and the back. If you look at older bikes, I think it's probably because they were changing their tires a lot more frequently. The tire technology wasn't there. Yeah, that you could do something like that. That's really the only way to do it at the front, would be some kind of swinging center stand off the front wheel, or you have a center stand that you can balance the bike like I don't know, many modern bikes, not the KLR. Does not have a center stand, at least stock. Let's see. That's a good question though, and maybe we should come out with a front wheel center stand. That would be cool. I'm game. Craig says, any chance we can maybe get some white wall tires? The limiting factor there is that 18-inch wheels. There's not a whole lot of options. There's not a lot of white wall options. But I will show you something here. Look up Porta-Wall. And we've done this. If I don't know if y'all have seen the Milwaukee bike. We did. Let's pull up some pictures. Here they are. Porta-Wall makes these really cool white wall inserts, which we've used on a bunch of our bikes. It's like impossible to tell that they're not part of the tire. The only downside is they're a little finicky sometimes to install, but they make them in 18-inch size. Here's a guy installing them right here in this picture. They make them in 18s, and they look good. And if you ever do get so dirty that you get tired of them, you can always put a new set on. So we do encourage the white wall, the Porta-Walls. It's a pretty old company. They make them for old hot rods and cars, and they fit your bike. Check them out. I think you'll like them. Let's see. Jeep Mandan says, Cush Drive Hub. Smiley face. Yes. So the Cush Drive. So if you all are not familiar with what a Cush Drive is, a Cush Drive separates, so speaking of vibrations, this is all the same thing, separates the rear sprocket from the main hub of your wheel. There's a bunch of different ways they do it. The most common is that it has this ring, like a ring of rubber biscuits. I mean, some of them, they're just like an actual rubber biscuit. Like actually our 50cc, believe it or not, the wheels we used on that has cush drive. And it's like, you can actually, if you just hold the wheel, you can just pull the sprocket off. It'll just slide right off. And it fits in these rubber bushings. But the more common modern technique is that there's this like rubber ring with teeth on it. And that allows the sprocket to move back and forth. And so when you go to apply a lot of torque to the sprocket, when you go to accelerate, the engine vibrations, which are probably what you're feeling, are actual piston strokes. When those go through the drive chain to the rear wheel, it smooths those all out. And I would agree. I believe that on the 450 would benefit from a cush drive. And we're working on it. It'll take a little bit, but my goal would be that if we were to be able to come up with a solution for that it would be retrofittable to folks with the current setup, so that you could take advantage of it. Let's see, a couple more comments here before we close down. Hey, from Syracuse. 969 delivering tomorrow. Thanks so much. Yes. Congrats, Steve. Welcome. I'm assuming that you're in Syracuse, New York, not the Syracuse, Indiana, which is about 20 minutes down the road, because you wouldn't be having it delivered. Multifaria says your solution does not change the appearance of the bike. Oh, you're talking about the exhaust. Yes, that's another benefit. Like, you don't even know it's there. And honestly, it's kind of cool. I was thinking we should call it the as you can see it here on the bike, it should be called the oil tank protector. That would be the euphemism, how we market it as a positive. This adds a protection to you. We can put a little grill on there. I should mention to anyone who's wondering, the cutout in the middle not only reduces weight, but it would allow you to do your oil change, drain your reservoir without having to remove this part, which would be stupid. Let's see. Next up, we got Seth Mark says, Porta Walls, Lord help me. BTDT. Yes. Porta Walls, they can be a bit of a pain, but we haven't had that much trouble installing them. Ken Plums, I have had legitimate dreams about when I get stateside and first ride my 450. My test ride was unlike any bike I'd ever rode. I love that you sit with good posture on these bikes. I completely agree with you. I'm a fan of ugly old dual sports in a lot of ways, and one of the things that ugly old dual sports have for them is that you just sit up and you got this great stance. And I've said this many times, but the KLR, lots of engineering on all of the Janus bikes is indebted to the Kawasaki KLR, the ugly, not really good at anything, good at most things bike. And that was definitely something that we really wanted to ensure with, especially the Halcyon. I mean, we're not as concerned on the Griffin, and we were not as concerned at all on the Phoenix with comfort. But yes, absolutely. Ken, remind me, are you stationed overseas? I think if I remember right, you are. Remind me if you are. He says, I know that 450 highway bars are projected. Do you have any designs theory you can show in that? I guess I would point you all in the direction of the, let me see if I can pull it up here real quick. Milwaukee. We built a bike for Milwaukee. And they just posted a picture of it. I don't know if we're going to be able to find a picture of that. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So this is the bike we built for Milwaukee. Oh, we can actually, can I play a video on YouTube of YouTube? Does this even work? What? Wow. I don't know if this is good. There you go. So there's a walk around. You can see the Porta Walls, and I don't know if you can really see very well, but we do have crash bars on. Let's see if I can get it closer in. There they are. So these are some prototype crash bar or highway bars we did. They're not going to look exactly like this. I would love it if they would go a little higher up. I love the look of classic old Indian style. There's kind of a view of it down there. But yeah, that's kind of the rough idea. If you want to look up the Milwaukee bike we did for him, complete with the Milwaukee packouts for saddlebags. I thought that was pretty clever. I didn't know you could play YouTube on YouTube. That's pretty cool. Anyway, moving right along. You've moved of late to redefining your market segment, and I'm interested in your thought process. Huh. Yes. Well, I think we have, Seth. We're defining it really well. But one of the things that I've been struck by is that everything that we've been saying and writing, and it's all stuff that I've been thinking all along. I really haven't had a very good vocabulary to talk about it. And so I think some of it comes along with just the confidence of having been around as long as we have, that we are willing to just say, you know what, if you want something different, that's great, but that's not what we're doing. Or if you like this, great, this is a different thing. I don't know, just being more confident in what we're doing is part of it. But I wouldn't say so much that we're redefining it as that we're figuring out what it has been all along. And I'd love to dig into that more. One of these days we should get Grant in here and we can go back and forth on that, because we've really been putting a lot of thought into it lately. And I'm excited we have a lot more content to put out on it that I haven't had time to finish. I'd love to talk more about it. Seth, one of these days we need to hang out. I'd love to talk more with you on that. Ken says, correction on that. I am overseas, breaking the fourth wall, playing a video on YouTube. Yes. Yep. For our trip through Canada, Janus employees are welcome too. Side note, is Charlie allowed in Canada? I don't know if he is. He might be banned in Canada. Straw Dog. Hey, Straw Dog. I haven't seen you on for a while. Could you adapt a tool bag bracket, or at least in the comments, that is. Could you adapt a tool bag bracket on the 250 for the left side of the frame that would mount a rotopack? That would really be cool. Yeah. I mean, I don't see why not. For the 250. It would almost be as cool to mount it on the, like when I've run them, I mount them on the cargo rack, the luggage rack, and it works really, really well. You can just like bolt it right onto that and it works. But a side mount would be pretty cool. I'd worry it would get in the way of your leg. I'd have to look at that. Seth says, I believe that the bikes are emotive and evocative. I bet most owners buy on aesthetic. I think you're right. On some level. I think the argument can be made that they are worth what they are worth for more than just that, but that's harder argument to make. And one that we have to just trust our owners and see what they say too. Eric says, I wanted to say that thanks on the 450 rear rack. Looks awesome. Also for the help from your parts department on a few of the missing hardware pieces. Great service. Yeah, there's been an internal debate on those spacers, Eric, whether or not they're required. But we've got it all figured out. Ken Plum says, Janus possesses a unique look and feel. They look and feel good. Thank you very much. I agree. Martin Drew says, are you a Fortnite guy, Richard? I love watching Fortnite's videos. Heck yeah. I mean, I think for the most part, the only thing I disagree with Ryan Fortnite on, and I'll say this on the record, is the Suzuki Katana is not ugly. It's a beautiful motorcycle. And if you haven't, one of the folks that I'm really, actually, this is a nice little segue, I'm really excited to have, is we have one of my favorite YouTube motorcycle content creators, along with Ryan Fortnite, who's great, is a guy. It's called Bart, B-A-R-T. Just look up YouTube Bart, and he does some incredibly detailed videos. They're very low production. I mean, he basically just finds footage and then voices. It's basically a spoken essay on motorcycles, and he did one last week. I think it was last week on the Katana, and let's just say that we are of one mind and heart when it comes to the Katana. But the exciting news is that he will be coming out to review some Janus bikes in August, and I'm really excited to meet him and hang out because we've exchanged some really long emails about motorcycle design and what it means to be retro. He does a great video on retro motorcycles where he calls it specifically the Honda GB500, which is our motor. Basically, it's the Honda version of our of the 450. It's the 500. Anyway, this is really rambling on. I probably need to wrap up here. Let me finish what Martin says. Are you a Fortnite guy? Is Janus going to bring us the grocery grabber that some say hasn't been around since Honda's Silverwing? Yes. Okay, I just watched the Silverwing video. Actually, Grant and I are both talking about it today. Some of us have longings opposite of those who love bobbers. Yeah, I mean, you gotta just take a look at my my Halcyon 250. It's a grocery grabber. That's a hard one to say. I mentioned my big old aluminum panniers that I use to prop the rear wheel off the ground. I always leave those on because I ride my bike every day, and I get groceries in it sometimes, or coffee machines, or whatever I need. And they're not exactly pretty, but they look pretty cool in my opinion. It's a very utilitarian. Seth says, great art has better ROI than great commuter cars, I think. Stupid little heart down in my corner of my screen. I agree, Seth, that I think there's the practicality, like I've said before, is not the main thing we need to be worried about when we're talking about rambling and we're talking about vehicles that inspire emotion and passion, like all the great vehicles. Even like I've said before, even the lowly Volkswagen Bug, that my first car, inspires. I mean, it was a phenomenal vehicle to drive around in. I mean, you felt like you were flying, like I always say. So, and it was not an expensive car. It was not designed to be expensive. It was not ritzy like a fancy vehicle. So, and some people say it is like art, but I agree. Anyway, I think this is probably a good time to wrap this up. This has been wonderful. I look forward to more of these less formal ones. I don't always have I was doing a lot of design today, but it had to get done before the Ramblestream. So I don't always have something to work on in the evening, but we can always have a conversation. Maybe as time goes on, I will get more organized with how we can ramble, but maybe in a little bit more of a flow, or have a bit more of a program. I'd love to, at some point, actually, team up with somebody on this. I'd love to have a conversation where we could have more than one person on the stream. Maybe somebody from outside of the company, that is. Whether it's from a different motorcycle manufacturer or a customer or an owner or something like that. So anyway, thank you all. This has been awesome. This comment thread is great. I love it. So thank you all very much for your engagement, for hanging out with me, and I will catch you all. Oh, by the way, hope Monday nights are working for everybody because they work much better for me. Anyway, I always leave these feeling inspired. Thank you all, and I will catch you next Monday, I believe. I'll make an announcement otherwise for the next Ramblestream, 7 p.m. next week. Thank you all, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.